Thank you everyone for joining. So welcome to this Thriving from the Start event today, where we're going to be talking about navigating and thriving through early career transitions specifically. So my name is Nicole Fernandez and I work within audit in PwC. And I've been part of the Thriving from the Start committee for a couple of years now. So just a little bit about what the Thriving from the Start network is. It's a mental health network for young professionals, run by young professionals as well, really aiming to share resources with people in their early careers to kind of navigate that mental well-being in their early careers. And it's a committee that is overseen by MindForward Alliance, and MindForward Alliance are a leader in the workplace kind of mental health, which works with businesses to build mentally healthy organizations. So you might have heard of them before, but if not, definitely check them out. And also, if you haven't already signed up to the Thriving from the Start network, Farima is going to drop a link in the chat just so you can register to the network. And in this way, you can stay updated on future events and also have access to various resources. So, when we're talking about mental health and mental well-being kind of during our career and in the workplace, it's really important to have these things in the kind of front of our minds, because as exciting as it is, starting new careers and having all these changes, it's also a time when people, are facing new pressures and uncertainties and possibly quite a few transitions in the workplace. And of course, cultural landscapes may be different across the world, but this is an experience that, can universally apply to people all over the world. Before we kind of get started into the whole meat of the conversation, I just wanted to share some research that MindForward Alliance have done over the last few years in terms of incidents and causes of poor mental health. So 72% of over 1,000 early careers respondents had experienced poor mental health in a 12-month period. So, if you think about that, it's quite a large number of us. And 28% said poor mental health has impacted their ability to do the job well and concentrate at work all the time or often. And also just 27% of these respondents would be comfortable using mental health services offered at work if they were struggling with their mental health. So that kind of relates to the stigma attached to mental health and mental well-being, possibly in the workplace. But, we're here today to kind of try and break that down a little bit more. This is MindForward Alliance research, but when you look at other research, there's a lot of kind of corresponding findings, and it yields quite similar results in the last few years, especially all over the world. And I think this just means that we should be paying more attention to our mental well-being to ensure that, we're able to maneuver our way in the workplace in a way that's best for each of us, and so that we can thrive really throughout our careers. So I would like to get started a little bit talking about my personal experience, with the topic that we are discussing today, which is kind of navigating through early careers transitions. So I joined PwC on an audit graduate scheme where we also had to do the ACA exams, which is the qualifying in chartered accountancy, right? So the first couple of years that I was at PwC, it was split between training, exam periods, and full-time work. So I wasn't just kind of diving into full-time work. And I think this helped me a lot in terms of adjusting into working life. However, immediately after the exams, it was straight into full-time work. And I personally felt quite unstable, having gotten used to a different sort of routine over the last, 2 years or so. And I found that the pressure of busy seasons in audit and meeting certain expectations were impacting me quite a lot more than I expected it to be. And it resulted in my migraines flaring up a lot, which is something, that I've been struggling with since kind of my early teens. And I realized that I had to do something about this. And so I was booked onto a project which was lasting kind of a few months, and I started having one-on-one catch-ups with my line manager to update them on my progress, where I was struggling to meet expectations, and also just trying to give enough time before a deadline to make my concerns known. I think this helped me a lot because these catch-ups helped me kind of deliver work with additional help where I needed it, instead of just taking it all upon myself and then stressing out at the last minute. And I think what gave me the confidence to actually start this and have these catch-ups with my line manager was first speaking to my peers who I did the exams with and who joined the graduate scheme at the same time that I did. So I spoke to them about, how I was feeling, and I realized that they were in the same boat. They felt the same way. And I thought that, this might be something that happens to a lot of people on different grad schemes as well. And me speaking to my line manager wouldn't be so out of the ordinary, as they would have probably seen this before or maybe even been through it themselves. So I think for me personally, opening up was a huge thing. And it just helped me realize that I'm not going through this alone. There are other people in that same kind of in place. And I think that solidarity with others really helped me to kind of carry on in a very constructive way, I would say. Um, so I think enough about me for now. I would like to introduce Hannah, who is our other panel speaker today. And maybe, Hannah, let's start with what your current role is.
Yeah, so I am currently on an HR grad scheme at Lloyds Banking Group, so I'm completing my chartership to become an occupational psychologist.
That is, every time you say that, I'm just like, wow.
Every time I think it, I go, oh goodness, am I really doing it? Because it's a journey I started about
Yeah,
4 or 5 years ago, so it's really nice to be able to say it because it's been
yeah.
a dream a long time in the making.
No, it's amazing. It's amazing. Maybe if we talk about how the experience of starting a graduate role has been for you, and kind of let people know how that is.
Yeah, it's been there's been ups and downs. I think I'd be lying if I said it's all rosy. As I mentioned, this is something that I've been working towards for a number of years. So I originally kind of qualified back in 2018 and started a career in mental health, and was really happy doing that, but just not feeling it was for me. And so that's when this all kind of started. But that puts pressure on what I'm doing now, and that transition. And for me, I'm so glad I made that move. But there've been many moments since I started at Lloyd's 2 years ago where I've thought, oh my goodness, what have I done? I put to one side a career where I was really happy and I was very good at what I was doing, and then kind of thrown myself in the deep end and started from scratch all over again. And that's been so worthwhile, but also really challenging in navigating that uncertainty, in navigating the I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know anything anymore, and remembering that that's okay. That's
Mhm.
part of the process, and you don't know everything from the beginning. But I'd say that's probably been the key challenge that I've experienced through that primary transition of literally changing career. It stayed within the field of psychology, but the work I do now is miles apart from what I did before. And then the second piece in relation to transition has been within my grad scheme, we rotate every 6 to 8 months. So for my specific scheme, it's been 8 months. For other HR schemes at Lloyd's, it's 6. The principle is you take a few months to settle in. You go through that confidence growth, you go through the learning curve, and then you start all over again in a completely different team. And so there's that second element of more regular, arguably smaller scale transition, but that's still regular movement and needing to navigate and settle into a new team all over again.
Yeah, definitely. I think you've been through somewhat like a really big transition, and then as you mentioned just now, just all these kind of mini transitions within the same organization. How has this, or kind of how do you find this impacts your well-being?
For the most part, I feel I've got some a good grounding in some good techniques to make sure I stay fairly level, which I know is something we'll come on to talking about in more detail later.
Yeah.
Um, so I think when I've had those wobbles that I've mentioned, for me, I really notice it's the way that I think about things is more how I notice those dips in my well-being. And so those questions like, what have I done? Why did I do it? Um, I've made a mistake in giving all of that up to come here. Um, and then getting really sucked into those thoughts and letting them eat into my evening. So then noticing those changes in the fact I might
Mm,
withdraw from my home life. I might find that don't feel like doing some of the things that I like to do. It all feels a little bit too much, a little bit too much energy and effort is required, and I don't have that to give.
mm,
Um, and then at work, I'd say feeling, and I don't know how much of this is those thinking styles coming into play, but feeling like I wasn't doing my best work. That's
mm,
something I really remember from some of my earlier placements in particular, was thinking I can do so much better work than this, but for some reason just not feeling like I could deliver on that, and that leading to this kind of frustration of I'm better than this, I can do more than this. Why is that not coming out?
yeah, definitely. I think there's 2 points there in what you spoke about. So that feeling of, oh, I'm not doing the best that I can do, it kind of ties in with some of the research that MindForward Alliance have done. And, people during that time when, they're not doing so well kind of with their mental well-being, they feel like they're not really being able to give their best at work, right? And then I think another really important thing is that recognition of, oh, actually I think I'm struggling a little bit with my mental health and my mental well-being, because oftentimes I think it's so easy to just carry on and ignore, carry on and ignore, carry on and ignore, but then these things kind of build up. And so I think recognizing first when maybe you're not feeling yourself, maybe other people have noticed a different kind of change in you, and being open to, okay, maybe I am, feeling this and going through this, and what can I do to then feel better about it, which, like you said, we will come to in a little bit. But so now I think you are rolling off your grad program, right? So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, because who doesn't love the process of applying for jobs and going through all of that joy? Um, and I think I mean, as I've kind of already said there, it's a challenge already. No one likes interviews. No one likes going through the job application process. It's a kind of necessary evil. Um, but going a level deeper than that, there are two personal challenges that are very, very live for me right now. The first is I'm juggling all of that with the fact I'm still completing assignments, I'm still working on my chartership and still working full time on top of that. So juggling all of that and having a social life and eating healthily and doing everything else that we need to do to look after our well-being, juggling all of that, spinning all of those different plates at one time, it can be challenging at times because all of it is equally as important. And so I found that real need to prioritize and be really disciplined and focused with my time. So I make sure that none of those plates get dropped. It's been a big challenge which I'm navigating. And then the second one is even kind of taking a step back from that and what do I actually want to do? Because I've had
Mm,
the incredible opportunity of being able to move around different teams and try very different types of work, which is exactly why I wanted to go down this route. Um, but it is then thinking, who am I? What's really important to me? Matching that with what's also available. Because how often is it that your dream job is out there at the same time as you're looking for it? So that's been the other challenge that again I'm working through at the moment with a lot of reflection and going through coaching and working with my line manager and so on to really think what does that next step look like for me.
Yeah, and I think that's really an important question to sometimes ask ourselves, right? What is it that we want to do? Because again, we can kind of get stuck in a trajectory that is maybe the path of least resistance, let's say, and just like easy to follow. But I think asking ourselves what it is that we want to do, because I think for me, I didn't have rotations on my grad scheme, but we have a good kind of program within PwC where we can see all the different careers that are out there within the company, and we can apply to it internally. And so I was able to work with different teams in the years that I've been at PwC to kind of find where I might fit better and what kind of work I might like better, just to try and like broaden my kind of horizons a little bit as well. But no, I
Yeah.
think that's really important.
And it's great that we have the opportunity. That's something
Mm,
I try to remind myself really regularly is actually we're so lucky to have so many choices and to be in a position where you have this challenge. Oh no, there's so many things I'd like to do. How do I pick what I want to do first? So I do really try to reframe that and think
yeah,
see it in that positive light as well, because otherwise it can be so easy to get sucked into this is stressful, this is overwhelming, so doom and gloom, when
yeah,
actually it's not to put too much or not to put unnecessary pressure on the
mm,
situation, but it's we are very fortunate to be
yeah,
in that position. And I was going to share as well that I think one thing which is really helping me at the moment is remembering that we are all going through this, whether it's rolling off a grad scheme, whether you're early in your career and thinking about what you might like to do instead, as I was kind of first time round. And I was thinking about this before the call and thinking back as far as my sixth form days, which was a frighteningly long time ago already. Um, I think only one or two of my friends are doing the same thing as what they did when they
mm,
started post university or post school. And so I think that it's really important to remember that we do all share that experience. And so
mhm,
I can imagine on the 60 odd people that are on the call today, we've got so much value, so many valuable insights that we could be sharing with one another on how we as individuals have navigated that. And also that shared experience is so important to remember that as alone as we might feel, we're never alone. There is
mm,
always someone else that will be able to kind of share those feelings, and it's
mm.
so important to reach out and as we are today sharing and talking about that experience so we can all help one another.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No, thanks so much, Hannah. Before I kind of invite Jan into the conversation, I just wanted to let everyone on the call know that if you would like to ask any questions, you can just pop it in the chat at any point, because we will be doing like a questions and answer section later. So if you just pop your questions in the chat or message Farima directly, that would be great. So now let's hear from Jan, who has a very vast background in mental health and the workplace. So Jan, why don't you tell us a bit more about your background and your work with people in early careers?
Thank you. Um, so I work with MindForward Alliance, and I lead on the developing and delivering training and development opportunities around early careers line managers and recruiters as well. Um, but my background's always been around building healthier communities. I started off I was just listening to you and Hannah talk and thinking about the sort of tapestries, the journeys of our careers. And I started off as a youth worker, and then drugs and alcohol worker, and then social care, community development work, and then mental health worker, and then working my way through those different services. And around 15 years ago, had the opportunity, which I'm incredibly grateful for, to pivot and change and take all of that learning from building healthy communities into the workplace, and specifically into the global corporate workplace. And how do we translate that knowledge around successful, healthy, dynamic, resilient communities or individuals and put that into the environment, the ecosystem of a workplace? And that's where my work's been for the last 14, 15 years. And when I look back at my A levels, it feels like a very long way away. But it's interesting how the learning that we pick up from situations, maybe from roles, from personal life experiences, all adds to our ability to be able to navigate that next part And I think that's one piece of it as well, to really agree with Hannah's point around we're all going through different journeys, and hopefully our careers are long and illustrious and they feel successful, and really about pacing ourselves through that as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think maybe if we talk a bit more about kind of the challenges that you've seen in early careers populations when the kind of transitions come very quickly and maybe just a lot at the same time as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for your generation as well, there's an enormous amount of uncertainty. There's an enormous amount of change that's coming. So you have these transitions as well as that backdrop and context of what's going on, regardless of where you are in the world, and maybe regardless of how clear and certain you were of a particular path that you were going to take, or how life was going to play out by this stage of life as well. Hannah was talking about that sort of frustration from not being able to do your best work at certain key points. And I think many people feel that, and we see that reflected in our training as well as our research. But for some, that can manifest itself or develop into unhealthy perfectionism and the drive to want to perform because of all of the work that people have put in to get to this place in their careers so far. And the competition is high, and there's, depending on each individual's journey, there's often many challenges and hurdles to get through. That sense of wanting to achieve can then start to create unhealthy perfectionism, which, contrary to our hope and our driver behind it, actually creates or often means that we create worse work or worse outcomes than we're hoping to achieve. And then running alongside that, very similar, is imposter syndrome as well. And whether we label these as syndromes or particular behaviors and thinking patterns, or whether they're just our realities, I think often we can get caught up in. But if we find ourselves feeling that we're not the right person to be in this room, that we don't know anything to say, that we haven't got anything to add, even we're not following the conversation, and that in itself, it's probably something we've all experienced at some points in our life, and it can feel very undermining and worrisome. Particularly, we then start to look around the room and we look for evidence to reinforce that, when everybody else seems to be thriving and coping. And Hannah was talking as well about all these different balls. Everyone else seems to be juggling really well, and we're struggling just to deliver on one piece as well. So imposter syndrome or feeling out of place is often one. And then another one is around burnout as well. People just feeling very depleted, very low energy. And when we have low energy, it's very difficult to then re-energize ourselves and regroup in some way. And even when we know it's around nutrition, it's around sleep, it's around prioritizing, it's around engaging with things that feed us in different ways, as we all know, it's difficult to do that as well. So those are probably the main ones. I think another one that comes up, and actually I was having a conversation with one of the law firms that we work with at MindForward Alliance recently, and talking to their recruiters as well as some of the people that were going through the early stages of their careers. And they were saying that one of the challenges that they faced was around the strategies that they applied so far in life that have enabled them to be successful were no longer effective. And whether that was around planning their time, whether that was around communication style, whether that was how they operate in busy environments, how they manage multiple demands on their time, they were no longer the effective strategies that had helped them through and they felt confident relying on. And again, I think that can leave us feeling a little bit uncertain and a bit in free fall when we know we have the knowledge, we know we have the ability, we've earned our right to be here, but we just can't apply the right thinking or strategy at that time to be able to deliver and shine.
Yeah, no, that is difficult. And I think that changes as we progress through our careers, and we find that there are different things that we need to think about as opposed to what we were thinking about in our early careers, for example. But all the things you mentioned, I personally have at one point or another found myself in that thing, unhealthy kind of perfectionism and imposter syndrome and burnout. At one point or another, I have felt that or gone through that, which is to say that, it's just an experience that can hit just so many people, right? It's not like a thing that I'm facing individually. It's a collective of people are facing it, possibly at the same time, possibly at different times. But again, I think just to Hannah's point earlier, it's just that you're not alone when you're going through all this. And so just kind of remember that, I think it's really important. But I touched on this very briefly in the beginning, but it's kind of around the issue of stigma.
Mm.
So I think just with the high incidence for mental health and kind of the high levels of stigma as well at this stage, I don't know if maybe you can kind of talk to that a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. So I think stigma's with us all the time, and around that sort of unhealthy perfectionism type thinking, this idea that maybe we'll get to a stage in life where there is no stigma or we feel free of that is probably unrealistic in that way. So it tends to manifest itself in different ways, and it tends to dial itself up and have more of an influence over us or lesser an influence, dependent on a number of different factors. A lot of that around very much what you were talking about earlier around your peer support networks, around finding safe places to engage and share how you were feeling and get support that you need. And there's often a high incidence for those in your age group or this stages of their careers as well around mental well-being challenges, and then also high levels of stigma as well, for all of the reasons that we're aware of and that we sort of touched on around that competition, that drive to achieve, that environmental piece. But as well as, I think, certainly your generation and those that are coming into the workplace now are far more emotionally literate and aware and understanding. But does that necessarily translate to this stage of life? Maybe the conversations that you could have more openly in education, university, or training programs that brought you into organizations, maybe now people are becoming much more concerned and much more cautious about what they share with others. Again, that can come around to the competitive nature of environments, which is why, you know, a significant chunk of our work is not only at Mindful Alliance, is not only with early careers, but also with senior leaders and middle managers as well, because they help create the environment. They help to create the translation of a global organization's values into the day-to-day culture. And if they can create an environment where actually they are pushing, they are stretching, they are creating an environment for you to develop and grow, as well as showing that intrinsically linked to that is your mental well-being, and that will enable you to perform and perform sustainably over a long period of time, then I think stigma starts to dissipate to a greater extent, and we can start to share more about ourselves. And I don't know if that was the case for you. You spoke to your peers, I think you were saying, and then you sort of had the confidence to then raise it with others within the organization, and then eventually talk to your line manager. And that's a gateway to then being able to access some more knowledge and resource. But I think you used the word normalizing as well in your introduction. And I think the other stigma that we don't often talk about, because we often think of stigma as external and around us, is the internal stigma that we carry as well. And for many people, it's very common to have this personal sense of shame about ourselves, that we could do better, we should be doing better. And regardless maybe of the number of different campaigns or posters that an organization is putting around, we internally feel very concerned about ourselves as well. And that's something that I often see, and colleagues that work in this area as well, in the MindForward Alliance team, see that people struggle to articulate, have that emotional literacy, and be able to move through the stigma and then access whatever is going to be working for them in terms of strategies.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just a point that you mentioned earlier, we have seen, I think, a lot of cases where there are companies who really prioritize employee mental health and well-being. And in that way, I think they've done some sort of research, you know, into that, where it really does show that where the tone from the top is one that prioritizes mental well-being for everyone, for all the employees, it actually makes such a big difference in the overall even just effectiveness and performance of the company. So I think that, you know, moving forward, if we see more companies kind of head that way, that would just be so great for everyone, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to sort of develop that point a little bit further, I think there's also, and I hope it's empowering, there's an enormous amount of opportunity that sits within you as a group. You have so much knowledge and opportunity to share that back up, that sort of reverse mentoring as well. So again, it's when we feel comfortable and when it's appropriate, but find opportunities to help shape the culture as well, because regardless of our job title, wherever we are in our career, we have the opportunity to add to the culture that we want to see, and also that we know will be creating the best environment for others as well, rather than waiting till we get to a certain part in our careers.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think a question around what have you found that helps young people support their mental health? Maybe if you could touch upon that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's as individual as we all are.
Mm.
And Hannah was saying, there's 60 odd of us on this call, and we've all got our own experiences and stories. I think at the heart of it, the people that are the most resilient, the people that are most capable, and that are able to balance their energy and demands are those that see this as a lifetime of learning. It's often said that the longest relationship we're going to have in our lives is with ourselves, and the better we get to know ourselves, the more interesting, the more fulfilling that relationship's going to be. So I think learn about yourself is at the heart of this. Understand who you are. Understand what success looks like for you at different stages as well. What does healthy look like for you? What do you want to achieve out of this? For many people, I think, to even get in the door and to be in the positions that you're all in, looking at the chat and where you are in the world and the roles that you're doing and the organizations that you are part of and adding to, it's a phenomenal achievement in itself. And apply the same thinking, the same business acumen, the same planning to this agenda as you would to any other agenda that you want to succeed in. It means that we have to repeat it. It means we have to keep coming back to it. We have to apply time and thinking. But if we do that, we tend to then see the longer term results for that as well. And we all know that things like exercise are good for us. We know that nutrition and sleep is good for us. Networks, places where we feel connected to are important to us as well. But also having aspects of our life that feed us in different ways. So not our entire identity being around work. Good work is good for our mental health. That's absolutely for sure. But it's also about taking a rounded approach, whether that's in our friendships, our other relationships, developing other parts of our aspects and ourselves as well. Often people talk about exercise or being able to talk to others is helpful. I think often I've seen people get very caught up in this idea that we have to talk about our feelings in some way, and that has to be verbal communication, sort of one-to-one like we're doing now. For many people, that just doesn't fit their personality, their mode, their cultural experience, whatever it might be. So finding out what works for them, whether that's online forums, whether that's exercise, and that enables you to sort of recalibrate and become clear. Journaling, I do a lot of writing that I've learned over the years that really helps me and get clear on my thoughts. Find out and work on yourself in that way, and then you can start to expand. But the other key part of that is keep coming back to it. Because if we've just done it once, the likelihood, like we talked about those strategies before, they'll serve us at that time, but they won't develop with us as we go through.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I would actually like to ask Hannah. Hannah, just continuing on this conversation about kind of what helps support, mental well-being at the start, but also throughout our career. So what has helped you and your mental health kind of from your personal perspective, but also, your professional lens as well?
Yeah, so when I was thinking about this, I split it out into, I suppose, two topics to try and keep me on track and make sure I don't waffle for hours and hours about everything we could do. So the first thing from a personal perspective when it comes to managing my well-being, as I mentioned, for me, the main way I notice that my well-being is taking a bit of a dip is through the way that I think about things. And um, there is a lot of research into the different, they call them thinking traps or thinking styles, and essentially it's these different patterns in the way that we think about and interpret the world around us. And what we know is that our brains are incredibly lazy because they have so many different things to be processing at any one time. Where possible, they'll take shortcuts. So you think about good examples of things like stereotypes, how we have this kind of evidence base that's then used for us to make quick decisions about something or someone. Same sort of principle with these thinking traps, but in relation to how we interpret the world around us. So for me, what I notice is there's a lot of these should, must statements. I should be doing this, setting these really high expectations of myself. And also, Jan mentioned earlier around the sort of compare and despair. Everyone else is doing this, that, and the other. I'm not, therefore I'm rubbish. I'm failing. I'm not doing a good enough job. And so massively important step in managing that is just knowing that, identifying and being aware that these thoughts are happening. What I'm not saying is that these thoughts are wrong or that they're bad. because the kind of next step doesn't work if we attach this stigma to these ways of thinking. What we need to do is accept that I am feeling this way. That's okay. That's valid. I'm entitled to feel that way. How might I be able to reframe that situation? How might I be able to challenge that thought that has popped into my head that might not be the most helpful thought to have in relation to that situation, and try to just gradually start to see other perspectives. It's not about making everything positive, because the world is not puppies and rainbows and great things. It's really important to be balanced. And so taking that, kind of challenging that automatic thought that might have popped into my head and trying to rephrase it to think, well, yeah, I'm not feeling great at the moment and this situation is really difficult, but here's some things that I can draw on which show that it's maybe not quite as bad as my brain is telling me it is right now. So that's one thing which I found really valuable, and using things like journaling has really helped with developing that self-awareness. And getting into the thought, because sometimes you just feel bad, don't you? You don't necessarily know I'm thinking this particular thing. And so I do find it helpful to get all of that out on paper, and then over time I get into, right, what's actually bothering me. And then doing everything that Jan's also mentioned around keeping that balance of activities. For me, I find it's really important for me to do things which are meaningful for me. So outside of work, I volunteer at a local wildlife centre for the RSPCA, and it's work, and it takes a day out of my weekend, which is my rest time. But I find it so much more recharging and restorative than if I was sat on the sofa watching telly or doing some crafts or whatever. Those things are good. And there's an absolute place for them, and we're all unique in what will help us recharge. And I think that's the key thing, is know what helps you to your battery to recharge a little bit, and make time to do those things even when you don't feel like doing them. And then thinking about from a at work perspective and how I've navigated the things which have been causing that dip in my well-being, so going into the root cause as well. I think the two key standout things for me have been networking, particularly in relation to what I was talking about with roll-off and some of the challenges there, getting myself out there to make me more likely to be the first person that springs to mind when someone's got a job that they're about to be posting. And also tied in with that is being super clear on my personal brand. Who am I? What do I enjoy doing? And using that to be my kind of guiding light. It sounds really cheesy, but it's my guiding light in helping me stay focused and going forwards. I do balance it with not getting too specific. So when I'm thinking about what comes next, I'm thinking about types of work, ways of working, and the kind of work that I'd be doing, as opposed to, I want a career in this specific field. And that again ties into that personal brand piece. So just being super clear on who I am, what gives me value, will make sure that I get that value out of my work, which will help me look after my well-being and also help me to be more successful as I navigate that change.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that knowing yourself piece works in all aspects of our lives, I think. So, when it comes to our personal life and finding out what it is that that can recharge us, right? It's like that we need to know ourselves. But then in the workplace as well, knowing ourselves is important, because it kind of helps guide us into where we want to take our careers. And I think what you said about not being too specific as well is really important, right? Because I think having an idea of the direction that you want to go in is really important, but also being flexible to see the different kind of opportunities that might come up and you might enjoy as well. So, but if you close yourself off to that, you might not even see the opportunity at all, right? So I think being flexible is also really important. And I think what both you and Jan have said about not everyone has the same way of recharging or just kind of approaching their mental well-being is like a really I think, important thing to note, because just because for me opening up, was helpful to me, but that might not be the case for other people. And if it doesn't work for you, don't think that it's a you problem. No, I think just find what works for you, because that is going to be key, I think, to navigating your career over the course of, however many years. So yeah, I think that one really important thing is just that knowing yourself and finding what works for you is really important. I think, just a little bit conscious of time, maybe if I go into just a couple of questions that we've got. So Hannah, there's a question for you, which is, did anyone point you towards mental health resources with your business? Within your business, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And my answer isn't going to advocate best practice, because no, but it's because I'm one of those people who's really bad at opening up about how I'm feeling. Within I have my coping strategies, and I have my people who I can talk to, but I don't work for me wasn't a place where I felt, and that is it. It's because I didn't feel like I needed to bring them up at work. So I talk as kind of openly and candidly as I've done here, and I remember having conversations, particularly within my first placement, around how I was feeling, and particularly where I was feeling that I wasn't bringing value and how frustrating I was finding that. And I had a really good conversation with my line manager about it at the time, but it didn't lead to being signposted to mental health resources, because at the time I didn't feel like I needed it. However, what I do know, through my side of desk role as a chair of the Next Generation Talent Health and Wellbeing Committee, slight mouthful, within Lloyd's, is that that is where we were really advocating those sorts of conversations. So I do know that happens, and I would absolutely advocate doing that. It's just my personal experience. It wasn't necessary in that moment.
Yeah, I think sometimes it might be hard to navigate as well, because I remember at one point, was struggling quite a bit with my mental health at work, and I just didn't know where to go. And I'm sure, there must have been emails about it before, but I probably missed it or what, like, I'm not really sure, but I just didn't know where to go. But luckily there was kind of this guy who was in this capacity of like mental health first aider, and I knew that he was part of that, and so I was able to kind of ask him, and then he was signposted me. But I think for a while I had actually just thought like, oh my gosh, I don't know where to go, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to go. But I think one of the most important things is, when we join a workplace, is just trying to make sure that we are familiar with where these resources are, because we may need it, we may not need it, but it's just knowing where it is. Maybe we can help someone who does need it. So just trying to find where they are, and being a bit more alert and mindful of if any communications come your way and things like that. This is a question for everyone, but I do want to ask Jan first. Someone's asking, what can you do if you have a line manager that you don't feel you can talk about feeling overwhelmed with? Have you seen that before? Has anyone kind of mentioned these things and how to navigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's quite a common experience, and whether that's because we don't feel comfortable talking to them, or they're giving off signals that don't make us feel that this is the right place. It's irrelevant to some extent for this conversation. It's more about, what do you do about that? I think if there's scope to explore it with them in other ways, then there's an opportunity there. But I think if we're feeling like we need to go or we would benefit from understanding where those resources are that you were saying, and then accessing them, we need to focus on that for now. The development opportunity, the feedback, and all of that can come at another time when we're feeling more capable and resilient. I would suggest we look for other places. So you talked about a mental health first aider or mental health champion in the workplace, mental health allies, those individuals that have taken the time to train and know the resources well and know how to navigate a simple but effective conversation with a colleague at work, to be able to create an environment for them to be heard, validated, and then guiding them towards the resources, or, you know, what next? Where do we go with this next? Not necessarily about solution, but creating space for us to be heard. And that's really important, about our boundaries around that as well, and expectations. So seeking out some of those. The second, in most organizations now, because this is a far more developed part of the fabric of our business world, that we can take some time doing some desktop research and seeing what else is out there, and then enabling ourselves to go and access those resources themselves, I think is useful. If we don't feel comfortable speaking about ourselves, then, you know, I'm a bit concerned about a colleague or a peer of mine was asking about, is there any resource? Go and do that as well. We can always have confidential, off the record conversations with our colleagues in HR, or whatever HR looks like in your organization as well. And again, we don't have to personalize it. It's absolutely fine to say, there's a colleague of mine, there's a peer of mine, similar stage in their career as me, who's concerned about this. They've asked for some advice. Can you tell me what I can do, and gather in that way as well? If we have done that work on ourselves, and that regular work that Hannah talks about as well, about understanding ourselves, and you talked about as well, then we're far more likely to know where and what we need to do. I mean, it's a really good reminder of the work we do on ourselves today is only going to pay us tenfold tomorrow and going forward, as well as adding to that modeling environment around us as well. So I think seek out other places, find information for yourself. If you're not comfortable sharing it's for you, then that's absolutely fine. Find another way of doing that as well. Reminding ourselves that the research and the understanding we're putting for ourselves today is going to benefit us in the future. It's not necessarily going to show itself for now. And then the last one is and this is, I think, a quite a helpful thing for our careers in general, is becoming uncomfortable with not knowing as well. So if we're in crisis, it's a very different type of situation. You know, we need to access something now. But if it's that we have this sort of general feeling of malaise, or we're struggling, or Anna was talking about thinking traps earlier, if we're finding ourselves in repeated patterns that are leaving us dissatisfied, unhappy, worried about things, then exploring that for ourselves, and seeing what that means to us as well. If we're comfortable having those short reflective exercises, like journaling or whatever it may be, just taking ourselves off to a place where we feel comfortable. Because often, if we give ourselves the space, we can start to find some of the answers for ourselves as well. We're incredibly resourceful beings, and our brains are very helpful. Outside of work, there's a whole world of different resources as well. So we've got primary care, GPs in this part of the world. We've got some great organizations around the world that are community-based, that are offering helplines, support lines, groups. So it's really about finding our place. But I know I've said it a few times, but I would really, just to reinforce that point, start learning about yourselves and the resources now, so you can help yourselves. And to your point as well, Nicole, you can support a colleague, and that's really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And I would just like to also say, if anyone is struggling or going through a difficult time, we're going to be sharing links in the chat for some places that you can access external support. Hannah, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
I don't think so. I was thinking about how we can also help ourselves to feel more comfortable having those conversations as well, whether that's with a line manager or whoever that might be, because it could be inside work, it could be outside work. It's essentially whoever we're going to get that source of support from. And one thing that I know I've spoken about with people in the past has been around assertive communication styles, and just really making sure that we are it can give us a good framework for having the conversation, and making sure we're super clear on what we need, how we're feeling, without necessarily then feeling that we're putting that blame on somebody else. You've made me feel this way, for example. We're taking ownership of the way that we feel. It's more neutral conversation, and therefore that using that to help us feel more comfortable being open, and potentially being not potentially, being vulnerable with how we're feeling. So that was the only thing I was going to add.
Yeah, no, I think, John, you covered it all pretty well. I think just one last question. So someone asked, how do you manage feelings of overwhelm and being scared about making the wrong decision / missing out on opportunities? Hannah, would you like to go first?
First thing that popped into my head as you were talking there was be kind to yourself.
Mm.
It's okay to fail. It's okay to make the wrong decision. And so, yeah, that is the kind of, it burst into my brain as you were talking there. I'd say that's really important, is take that step back and ask yourself, am I falling into a thinking trap here? How helpful is that thought? And actually, do I need to be a little bit kinder to myself and reframe the situation? And I was so focused on that, but I've completely forgotten the rest of the question.
No, that's fine, but I think that's such an important thing, right? But I think life is a combination of making mistakes and learning from it, because I think we also learn about ourselves through the mistakes we make. So I would say to, you know, whoever asked this question, and maybe if someone else kind of feels the same way, is that I would reframe your thinking and take that fear away from kind of making a wrong decision. If you are looking at a situation and you feel that in this moment, this is the decision that feels right for me. If you look back later and think it's a wrong decision, that's, you know, that's fine. But in the moment where you've thought about the decision, you've thought about how it could affect you, you've looked into it, you know, maybe you've done some research, and everything is pointing to a yes, then I would say kind of jump in and learn from it. And if later on you decide, okay, maybe this wasn't for me, I think you would have learned about yourself a little bit more as well through that experience. And when you kind of move on to the next thing, you're able to think, okay, you know what, that was not for me, but I have learned this, and this about myself, and this is how I can apply it kind of moving forward. So I think that would be my take on it and what I would try to do. I think when I approach any opportunities or any decisions I have to make, I try to think about it in this way, in this way, which is, in this moment, do I feel comfortable making this decision? And if it is, then there's nothing else that I can do, and I just kind of go for it. But yeah, is there anything else anyone would like to add before we kind of close off the questions and answers? No, I think we're good, and really just conscious of time. I just want to thank everyone for kind of being here with us and listening in on our conversation. I hope it has helped even a little bit. And just a reminder, if you've not signed up to the Thriving from the Start network, you can do so. I think there's a link in the chat somewhere just to sign up, because then you can kind of see upcoming events and also just have access to the resources that we have on there. So thank you so much, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.